So you ask yourself, where does that money come from? And that question in all professional racing and motorsports is the most important one. And it's the reason why there's a bunch of scams out there like I've seen, because it doesn't work. What's up, people? Well, today we're going to talk about the actual economics of professional racing in the United States, specifically around open wheel. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is because this will be the most important video for any young person dreaming of or looking at getting into racing as a sport and professional sport, because the things I'm going to speak about today are not in any video for anyone to see anywhere, because that world doesn't let you know until you're already in it. And the people who are successful at it, frankly, don't want you to know how the economics work. So today I'm going to talk about my experiences over the last year and the economics and how it works. Because, of course, today my VinWiki video came out relating to the Road to Indy. And actually one of the difficult first tests I have where the car got wrecked. And that, of course, relates to money and how you keep moving on with enough time to practice, to run a series and get good enough to keep going in a professional racing world. So today we're going to talk about this, but we're going to go over the economics, sports marketing. I'm going to hint at the nature of Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren, who I had on this channel before, and what his background was like. I'm also going to talk about scams that relate to veterans, military, religion, crowdfunding, nonprofits, minority and diversity exploitation, and even something that works like a Ponzi scheme in sports marketing. And of course, a conclusion relating to racing and the ways in which racing with sanctioning bodies, tracks, and teams are broken because they don't work together like other sports. So as a personal note to all my fans relating to this channel, people who are watching, I guess I got to apologize, you guys. So I'm sorry, because in the last year and a half, I have been chasing my dream to race professionally, because I believed that with the exposure I have here, which frankly compares to and in some way overshadows the exposure of an entire series, I thought that would be my opportunity to race. And of course have been working with a lot of people, some nicer than others, which we're going to talk about to make this go. But that's made me very stressful and gotten away from being as happy-go-lucky with doing the cars. So I hope you'll all keep coming back and enjoying it, because honestly I feel like a new person, and doing this video is helpful too. So the first thing relating to racing on a professional level, racing as a sport is not in any way, shape, or form like football or baseball, etc., on a professional way. And I bring that up because, for instance, last year there was articles and stuff going out that Casey Puch signs with Legacy Autosport for Indy Pro 2000, which is really cool. And I'll tell you what that means. But what so many people took from that, the general populace that look at sports, is that I've got a full ride for the season. I'm part of that team and driving for it, maybe getting paid, which in the sense of like professional baseball or football, etc., is exactly what that means. But racing is not like those sports, because racing teams, and I don't care whether that's a feeder series like Road to Indy or IndyCar, generally speaking, is just a shop that owns a bunch of cars that a driver has to pay for to drive. That's basically it, most especially on the Road to Indy. And those shops have no magic money tree coming in from the series or the tracks or necessarily merchandising or anything else. So really the only way for a driver to go drive a car at a shop is to buy the ride. And that's what every single team on the Road to Indy, and generally elsewhere in America, is, because the economics of professional racing are completely broken. And as a note, because of that, that inherently only favors or allows wealthy young people to get the opportunity to do it. And when I say wealthy, I mean this. So let's look at Indy Pro 2000, which is what I drove. Give or take, depending on the team and how lavish they want to be, a full year's ride with a few tests is going to cost about $500,000 spent just to do that. That's not paying a driver anything. That's not paying for any of a driver's travel to do it. Nothing. That only pays for the car to go out, the consumables, and the team. That's it. So you ask yourself, where does that money come from? And that question in all professional racing and motorsports is the most important one. And it's the reason why there's a bunch of scams out there like I've seen, because it doesn't work. And racing, in terms of sanctioning bodies, tracks, and teams, do not work together and largely become predatory to each other, depending on where you are in the pecking order. So I have lamented about, but I'm telling you directly, The only people that get to practice enough and get into racing in a feeder series are wealthy. And by wealthy, I mean this. Okay, yes, behind me is a Lamborghini Gallardo that I own. Okay, that puts me in a different place. Obviously, I'm not really needy, but I am by no means rich enough personally to go race on the Indy, which means there has to be sponsors. Now, the problem is with that, the road to Indy, and frankly, IndyCar itself, does not offer enough exposure in our modern world to warrant a, respectfully, legitimate sponsor that just wants the exposure to put the money in for how much it costs. There's no exposure. This little channel of mine here gets more exposure than the entirety of the road to Indy. So that leads it to an interesting point. How is that supposed to work? Because no sponsor out there in the world that would normally sponsor a YouTube channel and see those incredible gains and such is going to go out and spend a heck of a lot more money to go racing. So those sponsors aren't going to work because they're not stupid. They need an ROI, and there's no way that racing makes them more money or gets them more exposure. They'll just sponsor YouTubers. I'll give you an example. VinWiki, and this, I'm not trying to make money, VinWiki demolishes the entirety of the NTT IndyCar series and Indy 500 in terms of views and its ability to influence worldwide. So, I mean, sponsors should be going there, and that's based upon numbers you can look up on the internet and Racer Magazine and everything else. So it was obvious when I thought that my exposure relating to there and here and everything else might give me the opportunity to go. But coming back to it, so a sponsor of mine or that's used to the social media world isn't going to sponsor racing. So the only sponsor that would potentially sponsor money to a person in racing would be a sponsor that's already in racing, that wants the added either exposure that a person with social media or an influencer can bring, as well their narrative, because maybe they're a better person to represent and sell product, etc. But let's also not discount this major fact. Most of the people in racing and with the sponsorships, etc., are very wealthy. And I would say the majority of them do it because they want to and enjoy it, not because there's a direct ROI. So young people need to realize that, because the road to Indy does not, that's the way to get in an Indy car, but does absolutely nothing for people that don't have the money. And I'll give you another example. So massive talent, okay? And this comes into the conversation with me. So Mike, relating to Legacy Autosport, was very nice. He's going to give me a couple of races and some tests and such, and we'll work together and do it on the cheap, because we're partnering up, basically, because he sees the value of me and I see the value of him, and we can do something big together. And frankly, I could see us owning and running an IndyCar team one day. And I think it'd be cool if Gina's Garage was in Indianapolis, because I have the ability to attract and cultivate mechanics and technicians and engineers for the entirety of the industry. So there's some really good things that can happen. But we run into a problem. Let's say this. Let's say I was able to practice just enough and pull enough natural talent out of my posterior to win a race in the road to Indy. Let's say 2 races, one road course and one oval. Okay, what does that give me? Absolutely nothing. You win no money, no one notices you, no sponsor comes. Now, you may say to me, Casey, that's negative. That's not the way it works in my mind. Well, I'll give you an example. So Cody Swanson is an unbelievable driver. That guy is the real deal. Racing, effectively, sprint cars, midgets, Silver Crown, all around the United States, making a living at it. Dude is talented. Legacy Autosport gave him a drive. He goes out in Lucas Oil Raceway or Indy Raceway Park, wins it. Just wins it right off in the USF the Indy Pro 2000 car. Now, what does that say to somebody who's intelligent and understands racing? Cody Swanson absolutely has the ability to race Indy cars and go all the way, drive the Indy 500. And honestly, he's a cool, down-home American guy that I and many other people would root for. But there's something wrong, because he got no sponsors, no offers, absolutely nothing, even though he can go out in an open wheel and just win it out of the gate. The economics are broken. He can stay there in, racing Silver Crown and Sprint Car and all that jazz, but there's no way to get in an Indy car because he's not wealthy. He's not bringing a giant money sponsor flowing machine to it. And that would be the same thing for me. So with Mike and the team, I look at it as a business standpoint. And first of all, I wouldn't have done everything in my life if it wasn't for looking at the basic aspects of business, whatever that may be, how you put time in, how you put money in, what you do with yourself, everything. So let's say I go out and win those couple of races. Why do I think I would be any different than Cody Swanson? Because Road to Indy and IndyCar does nothing. Now they do one thing. So if you win USF 2000, US Pro 2000, or Indy Lights, you win the championship for the year, you get your next year paid for moving up. And if it's Indy Lights, you get certain tests and things with IndyCar, et cetera. Now that's nice, but the funny thing that does is that really is only an extra magnet for the wealthy elite to be able to do it, because the only people who can race enough and practice enough to be good enough with the team and the expendables and everything you need to win a championship are already wealthy. So the problem is, now I say this, and in this day and age, people generally don't like the wealthy or the mass populace. But the truth is, IndyCar and all the feeder series are spec series. You can't come in there with ingenuity and brain power to build something new and win. So that gate has been closed. And the feeder series and everything to practice is only the wealthy. And somebody like Cody Swanson, who's All-American, goes out and wins one, he gets no shot and nowhere to go. It's completely gate kept. And the reason being is because the economics are broken. And frankly, the only reason that the wealthy want to do it anymore is because the name Indy is there and it has the Indy 500. Otherwise, it would just be a big American open wheel spec series. So how many years is it going to go before people look around and go, IndyCar racing isn't what it was? This isn't what we grew up loving and dreaming of. This isn't the American dream that only the wealthy can get in. Now, you say there's some other things. Well, Casey, there's other opportunities and things going on, and I've seen. Well, I'm going to get into that because a lot of the things you see sound good or glossy veneers are kind of just scammy. And those were the things relating to veterans, military, religion, crowdfunding, nonprofits, minority, diversity, exploitation, and Ponzi schemes. I'm not going to name any names, but we're going to go into it because this is the thing that's just been beating me up over all the years. Now, I want to bring something else up before I go into the negatives here, which are very interesting. So I was talking to a colleague of mine, professional, that we've been doing a lot of neat media stuff together. And I said to him, I said, you know, this is crazy. There's no money and there's no help to go road to Indy racing, to practice enough, to get good enough to race Indy cars, even with the exposure I have being rivaling the IndyCar series in many ways. Like, this should be a no-brainer to be able to have an opportunity to do it. There's just no sponsors. And I said, and for me to take the time and professionalism to go out and get the sponsors for me to do that while also being a professional athlete and doing everything else I need, one, that's crazy because those are two insane full-time jobs. It's just not realistic. But let's say I can do that. Let's say I can go out and get the racing sponsors that want it because of exposure and go race. That's cool. But if I'm able to do that and just put a suit in and present to board of directors of all these Fortune 500 companies and all, why the heck do I want to be a race car driver? I can go make a heck of a lot of money and own my own race cars series and have other people put it together if I'm able to do that. And I give you another example. So I also thought, I'm like, well, and if a sponsor's only coming in because of my exposure and they don't care about the series, why do I want to spend $500,000 just playing around in Indy Pro 2000? Do you know what I can do with $500,000? Because I could just keep the money and have the sponsor on my channel. I could invest in cars that will be worth more money. I could passively invest in maybe 5 to 10 years, double my money doing nothing. I can invest in a business. Hell, instead of burning it in racing in a pro series like that doesn't give you an ROI, I could take the money and just give it to charity for no gain. Would be better. And I said to the guy, I'm like, this makes no sense. Why would I do that? And he goes, Casey, who did you just explain to a T? And I go, Zach Brown. See, Zach Brown wanted to be a race car driver. And if you guys go on my channel and search Zach Brown, Casey Puch right now, you'll see the interview where I talked to him about his life and how he got to where he is at McLaren. But we didn't talk about McLaren or Formula One at all. We talked about him and his life. And it was the same thing. Same thing as me. Zach wanted to be a racing driver. Started off modest ways. He hocked a couple of watches that he won on Teenage Wheel of Fortune, I think, to make money to buy a go-kart or something and race. But then Zach at that time, he's a little older than me, found different ways to make money through advertising. And then realized it was much better in business lucrative to just start a company to do advertising. And he made a lot of money. And he led that, and now he's the CEO of McLaren. And guess what? Zach Brown, instead of just being a average good race car driver that made an okay living like a normal person, he's Zach Brown, CEO of McLaren, millions of dollars, lots of his own race cars for fun. Kind of a better gig. And I asked myself the same question. I should just do business, which is very sad because that means that myself, like so many other Americans or people around the world, is the American dream dead? based upon the nature and structure of the way it is, it effectively is. And the only way for a young person or old person, anybody, to have a shot to go race is if a wealthy person that just wants to have fun, believes in that person, enjoys it, and spends that much money to go racing. And that's the only way to do it anymore. And people know that, or feel it. And what that does is it breeds something else that I really don't like. The very scammy, gross, dirty, muddy world of racing that anybody coming from the bottom up has to wade through and understand to get through. And I got to tell you what, guys, it really wears on a person. And the reason being is because it takes a lot of money. And everybody's trying to get money from somewhere. Everybody wants to get money. They're not going to go out and earn it themselves. They're not going to find a way to give a good ROI to a business and do a basic business plan, because those are the good ways to do it. No, they want to find another way to do it. So what happens are people look out there and see what is popular in pop culture that they can exploit where there's potentially money. Now, I'm going to tell you a few things. This isn't for you to get triggered. But I'm telling you right now in 2022, there's a number of things, of places where people will try to exploit to get money. And those are, in no particular order, things that relate to veterans and the military. There's a lot of giving toward that, a lot of spending, and a lot of scrutiny on places to do that. Religion, as always. Look at Joel Osteen. He's rich AF. Crowdfunding, that's something they're trying to work. Nonprofits, everybody's looking for a tax dodge without doing anything real. And I don't see anybody else spending years of their life and thousands upon thousands of hours mentoring kids other than myself. And that's been a hard lesson for me, actually trying to teach kids for years, of seeing people manipulate nonprofits. And I fucking hate it and them. And then the other thing that's happening is minority and diversity exploitation. So I'm just going to, oh, and another one is a good one, a sports marketing Ponzi scheme, shall we say. Not exactly a Ponzi scheme, but it works in the same structure. So let's just bring this out. So veterans in the military, we've seen major support for our troops, our military in general, throughout the United States. I would say for the last 15 to 20 years has been a big thing. It's really come to a field. Now, when you get that sort of cultural environment, it's an opportunity to make money and do a lot of good, but it's also an opportunity for people to try to collect money for the wrong reasons. Where they're like, oh, I got an idea, we'll just collect money on the sake of veterans and we'll use it to go racing. I'm like, that's bad. So that happens. The other thing is religion. It gets exploited as well. Okay? Not everybody is anointed by God or gods to do good. And got to be honest, spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to go racing doesn't seem like the best way to, teach a man to fish, kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying? Probably not. And I've seen a lot of that, and it's really disgusting. So if you're in the racing world and people are all up in your business about religion and how great they are, you should probably run. Crowdfunding. Now, this is a good one. And I'm going to be somewhat quiet with all these because I could name names and I would probably put a hit put out on me. But crowdfunding is a big thing. Now, obviously, I'm on YouTube and we're talking to you this way now. And there are ways to manipulate different platforms. In the old days of YouTube, people could buy a lot of views and then pop the algorithm and make themselves big. Now, when I'm doing this is totally organic. I'm not putting in any money in. So if you guys are watching, thanks. I appreciate it. But still, something like Instagram is still hugely manipulated. It's not organic, okay? If you're going to be big on Instagram, you have to buy a service to go in and like other people and do things and make a lot of noise on your channel to pop the algorithm on Instagram. That's the game on there. So different people find different ways to get big. And then there's a bunch of people out there like, oh, well, if you have 1 million people following you, what if all those people only gave you $1? Durr. Well, first of all, that's not how it works. But that's what these people think. So I have seen some crowdfunding things put together to try to be for drivers, which are hilarious because they try to get the mass populace to invest in drivers. Yet if you actually review everything that they have to file with the commissioning exchanges and stuff for the business, your money's completely at risk. They have no assets. They have nothing. It's a cash grab. And they're probably registered somewhere like Fort Myers, Florida, where there's less laws, I guess, for things like that. And if you trace all the businesses leveled to one address there, you might find one that traces itself all the way to a UPS store. I mean, this is the kind of shady crap that goes in racing that people are legitimately trying instead of actually trying to create an ROI and working together with teams, series, legitimate big businesses that need an ROI. And then, the same thing happens because nowadays in the world, let's be honest, the world is trying to find equity socially, especially in the United States. So there's a lot of good support for minorities, diversities, etc., different kinds of marginalized people. But even that is being exploited. And the worst exploitation, and this is dangerous for me to even say this much, but let me ask you something. If you are trying to raise money for a marginalized person that is representing the world that maybe hasn't had the same breaks, don't you think it's kind of crappy if the marginalized person has a rich white father that's well-connected, that's basically just exploiting that for their family's own personal gain? Seems kind of not right to me. But then again, I guess I'm like too human. But yeah, that's happening. And an example I can give is I'm like, okay, so people are talking about how that person didn't have any breaks, but I know for a fact they're wealthier than everybody I ever went to high school with, including myself. And one of the engines of the many years they've been racing in costs more than I have ever spent in racing in my entire life. Yeah, I don't think they're that needy. I think they're just a person that tans better than I do. But that's something else that's happening. And the other thing, you get into like a Ponzi scheme type thing, it's not easy to get a sponsor. Okay, now there's people out there that think they're a big deal, like from the past, famous from the past, big names, everything behind them. And they're actually sitting there with their hands out, collecting money from young people that don't know this yet, or companies, or whatever else. They're literally riding on the coattails of their own past to collect money from people that don't get it, when they can't bring a sponsor and there's nothing else. In fact, I saw somebody doing just that, where every single one of the clients they have, whether it was a business, a person, or an athlete, they would just get each other to do something for the other person. Meanwhile, taking money that would create no ROI. And I'm like, functionality, it's the same as a Ponzi scheme, but with sponsors. I hope I explained that well. I was trying to keep it a little bit vague. And then what makes it worse with people trying to manipulate nonprofits, I saw this same thing. This is a big one you need to look out for. So for all the charities out there, watch out for this one, which I take massive exception to, spending a decade of my life volunteering to legitimate charity. So a person will go out there and find a racing driver and athlete, and they'll approach a big nonprofit and say, oh, we want to represent you. Our driver really believes in you. It's really cool. We want to put you on the car and represent. We think it's a great thing. We don't need any money from you. And so what happens is that person is doing that in hopes that they can get in the circle of all of the charity's donors, all the rich guys and gals and foundations and things. Because if they can, maybe they can work something and fund the racing. Isn't that kind of shitty? I think it is. And the thing about that is, you hope it doesn't work. But at some point, it might. And that's sad because it's really, really, really hard to build a legitimate charity in the world to do good. So you get somebody like that saying, oh, I offer all the best things and we're just here for you, represent it all together. Bullshit. They're just doing it to try to get money out of somebody for stupid racing, which you gotta come back to all of this. Is any of it worth it? Is it? All the people that are scheming for all the reasons, from like all these things that are just fine and fine, you're just functioning con artists in racing. Just get a life. Go somewhere else. But the thing that I realize is the fact that there are so many of these kind of cons or schmoozy BS people doing these BS things for fake reasons, or like, shall we say, not so ethical or moral, you know what I mean? Not like true, real, worthwhile business reasons. It must mean because there's something there for them. They're making money, and that's sad. And that's the horrific kind of just general greed that afflicts the racing world. And I think a lot of the reason why all that exists, especially in American, we'll say open wheel race, and I'm not picking on, is because the series, the athletes, the teams, and the tracks don't work together. If an athlete brings their own sponsor to a big team to go racing, the team will probably steal the sponsor from the athlete and kick them out. If a team gets a big sponsor for that team, the series will potentially steal the sponsor from the team. And if the track is making money from tickets, they don't want to put more money into the track because they want to make money. Yet, people actually coming to the races is dwindling hardcore. So if you look at it on a smaller way, somebody like Cletus McFarlane and doing Cletus and cars and such at like Indy Raceway Park, he's killing it. Tons of people making money because it's YouTube and people actually watch it because it's real. But something like IndyCar racing is struggling. They're in the past. They don't get how the world works anymore with social media. But there is enough money, and there is enough money from Penske, and he's a driven enough person that they get it. They're kind of getting it, and eventually they'll get somewhere where they'll have something. But I predict what will happen to open wheel racing is the teams will start dying, and the series will own the teams, and eventually it'll congeal to what it is, and it will be a spec series where you can just buy the cars. The days of building a car and making it are over with. And it's going to become more like football, baseball, etc., but it's going to happen in an ugly, slow decay way, I think, which is sad. Because the only way to make that sort of thing work nowadays is you got to get the mass populace to care. But as an example here in American IndyCar, which is sad because that's my dream, I love IndyCar racing, the dream is dead. They don't have a clue how it's going at all. And Formula One has gotten wise. Formula One is at least crushing with Drive to Survive. But IndyCar doesn't know how to be real anymore. They don't. And so these are the horrible things, you guys, that I've been dealing with. So as it comes to Mike and Legacy Autosport and me running Indy Pro 2000, and Mike offered me a couple of races and some tests, it didn't take very long before we realized all this, that the whole industry is broken. And there's better ways to do business and make money in the car world. And honestly, I'm looking at it with Mike. I'm like, Mike, Cody Swanson, who's already an all-American badass of open wheel racing effectively on ovals, he can go out and win and go absolutely nowhere in the world of IndyCar Road to Indy. Why do we think I'm going to be any different other than having people go along? We can spend the money on the car, but we're risking the car if, and I don't mean this negatively, but let's be real. You got some rich kid that doesn't work for a living, whose family is funding them to be there, and the rich kid just thinks it's funny and crash into you. The next thing you know, we've got a bill for tens of thousands of dollars for a broken car with no ROI and nothing that we could possibly win by doing it. Why would we spend the money? And that's the sad part. So that's why with Mike, I'm looking at like, let's keep going with what we're doing. Let's be real. But instead of putting the money and the effort into the Racing Pro 2000 and the amount of effort it would take to get me up to speed to practice, why don't we do it in racing that actually provides an ROI? So Mike and I are building an Indy Roadster because we like it and we love the history of IndyCar back, when you could actually build something and go racing. And that's cool. And we'll have a car at the end that's worth something. And we can still do the same YouTube videos and get the same exposure. But we'll actually have a tangible asset at the end, which is fun. And the other thing is with our time and effort, Mike and Butch have been amazing. They're volunteering and helping with Genius Garage to teach kids to actually build the mechanics and engineers of industry's future for no gain to them, just like no gain to me. So yeah, a better usage of our time than putting it into Pro 2000 where you can't win anything or go anywhere without money. It's just donate your money to kids and charity and mentor. So that's what we're looking at. I want to race Indy Pro 2000. I'd love to get in the Road to Indy. I'd love to do that because that's the best way to practice for IndyCar nowadays. There's other ways, but that's kind of the simplest one. But there's no ROI for real sponsors. And any sponsors you see at these young people's cars, it's just family money. Family companies that don't care if they get a return. Because to race in that, you do have to be wealthy enough to literally burn, and I do mean burn, $500,000 a year and not feel it or care. That's it. And there's no real ROI. What, to go become a race car driver to maybe be one of 3 people that could make $500,000 a year? Maybe they get paid $100,000 a year at IndyCar? Really? No. If you're that smart enough in business, you can do other things to make a heck of a lot more money and go race on your own. And I'm not saying this to beat up on IndyCar or American Open Wheel, but largely all racing has this problem in the United States. And it's broken, and the populace doesn't get it and doesn't realize. And I have to make this video because the mass populace watches my plight. And then we go out and do something like that in the pro world, and then I'm the one that looks like an idiot because the sport is broken, and the economics are broken, and the industry is broken. And I'm not okay with that. I'm going to tell young people how it actually works in hope that, one, they can avoid the dragons that be lurking, taking advantage of things like veterans and military, religion, crowdfunding, nonprofits, minority diversity exploitation, and basically Ponzi schemes. Yeah, avoid that crap. Because all it does is sap away your life and money and make you look bad. It's horrible, you know? And so I wish everybody luck that wants to be a racing driver, but you have to get somewhere. So my conclusion relating to all this, guys, and the reason I'm telling you this is the professional racing world in America, especially open wheel, does not work together. The series, the tracks, the teams, and the athletes do not work together. They're all separate entities vying in a weird sort of, it's kind of like, it's a weird parasitic ecosystem as it is. Like if it was in a terrarium, it would be a disgusting circus. This is not like a good terrarium. It's like a symbiotic relationship. It's a parasitic relationship of just eating the next one. It's like a horror movie. But other sports at least work better, but that changes the nature too. So I think people need to understand that if you want to get into racing. The other conclusion is social media is a lot bigger and more powerful than racing in terms of a return on investment. And I'm telling you flat out, I have looked at the numbers of the IndyCar series worldwide, what published through Racer Magazine, through in-person spectators at races, through TV viewing worldwide and media streaming, and VinWiki crushes it. Just VinWiki alone. Let alone all the other influencers out there. And it's organic, and racing needs to figure that out, what the general populace actually wants to see, or they're gonna die, because they're very, very, very expensive. And there's nothing really getting behind it except the wealthy people that want to get behind it right now. And the last conclusion, and I hate to tell you guys this, because racing is my absolute dream. It's what I've always wanted to do, and I love Indy 500. That's the American dream. That's what I grew up with. Hell, Mike and Butch's family goes back to the 1920s, decades before anybody ever heard of Unser or Andretti. But the truth of the matter is, nowadays, I have to ask the question, is it worth it? Indy 500, IndyCar racing, and racing at a high level is an awesome thing. And in a way, it's worth it from the human level, the athlete level, the man in the machine, and everything all the people of the world want to see and love and resonate with. But it just became a predatory environment, a weird parasitic terrarium of spec series that is existing only on a theater shell of its former self, with no ROI for a business or a person to get in, no matter how smart they are. And if they try, and they're that driven, and they're that talented to do something big, they'll probably just be smart like Zach Brown and realize I can create a much bigger industry and make a heck of a lot more money just doing sports marketing and leading a giant team. And honestly, I start looking at it the same way. I'd love to drive you guys, but I'm not wealthy. I can't afford to practice. And for the people out there that say, well, Casey, why don't you sell your Lamborghini and go practice? Okay. What you're suggesting is that I, as a business person or somebody that understands the value of a dollar, sell a tangible asset that took forever of my life so that I can go out and drive around a track for a few different times just so I can become a little bit more practiced and better. Okay. Then I ask you the next standpoint. Where's the ROI? Then what? What's there to win? Because if Cody Swanson can go out and win a Pro 2000 race out of the box, just like that, and there's no sponsors, there's no opportunities, and there's no IndyCar teams knocking on his door, why on the heck do you think I or anybody else would be different? And at which point, all I did is get rid of tangible assets or money that I could have done something with to do something big. It doesn't work, guys. It doesn't work. I'm going to still be here fighting and swinging and to make it better. And in no way is anything I said an attack on anything, be it a series or sanctioning body, anything. This is the God's honest truth. The only attack I make here is that I hate the manipulative sociopath con artists that are manipulating every good thing socially in America to try to go racing. I hate you guys. Don't talk to me. Because even if you're a sociopath and you think you're going to con me, you're not. Sooner or later, I'm going to see through you, and I'm going to put a stop to it. So let's save ourselves both the time and stay the F away from me. And also, and I'm not going to say the name right now, but there's somebody out there that I recently saw take $6,000 from a nonprofit to try to raise money for them and do absolutely nothing. I think that person should give the money back if they want to stay quiet. But that's just me. I don't know if it's possible to be honest and a good businessman and be in racing anymore. Unless you just want to do it for fun and you're wealthy. And that's the sad part. But guys, again, I'm going to keep swinging. And I'm in a better mood. I wanted to share this. I feel better. Mike and Butch are awesome at Legacy Autosport, and we're going to keep racing no matter what. Even if we go sprint car racing or whatever, where the economics are make a little more sense or we can afford to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to keep going. And again, the dream will stay to race in the Indy 500. I just don't know how realistic that is for anybody, no matter how talented, smart, or driven you are anymore. But that's it. So subscribe, guys. Lots more fun car stuff coming up, and this will probably be my last talk on the economics of racing. But I think it's important, and share it. See you guys next time.